This is a desert on the threshold of death. I think it's somewhere underground, but not deep. And around it, emptiness. You see how cold and still it is here, how desolate. But this is not yet your death. That awaits below, in the cold, when the last drop of color leaves your soul. We call it absolute death. Remember this always. Here in the void, nothing is more precious than color. Color is life. It is our food, our strength, our hope. It is the essence and meaning of our suffering. And now yours.
You awaken in a foreign world. Your surroundings almost look like an island, but not quite the type of land you are used to. A woman calls out to you. You have died, and now you're without a heart. The woman has given you one of her own hearts, and if you want to live, you must take it. As you approach the heart, the tree in the middle of the island lights up with a golden color. After taking the heart, it is time to meet the woman calling out to you. Inside the golden tree, she is wearing a silver dress that matches her hair, with a red ribbon going down her arm. This is Sister Death, and this is your introduction to the Void. The Void was released in 2008 in Russia under the English title of Tension by Ice Pick Lodge. Years before The Void, Ice Pick Lodge would release Pathologic, a game that at the time earned praise within Russian outlets but would have a lukewarm reception when released in the West. It would take years after the release of Pathologic for it to suddenly rise to cult fame thanks to reviewers such as Mandalore Gaming and more, bringing more Western eyes onto the game with videos praising its engagingly torturous gameplay and world. Since then, Ice Pick Lodge has grown a following thanks to Pathologic, with a sequel releasing and a new expansion announced for it to be released at a later date. If you're within the whole gaming essay or review circle on YouTube, you probably know Pathologic has grown into a darling for the content creators within it. Many well-known channels have covered both Pathologic 1 and 2 with incredibly well-made videos dissecting nearly every piece of the game mechanically and thematically. However, despite all of this, the Void seems to be left out of the discussion. Funny enough, the only reason why the game came to my attention is through the YouTuber Ragnar Rocks, who has a wonderful video covering the Void that would convince me I have to try it. Nearly 5 playthroughs later, the Void is a game unlike anything I have ever experienced. Originally, I wanted to review the game, but then I also wanted to write a guide on how to play it because, dear lord, this game can be unforgiving. And then I started wanting to do a deep analysis on the game's story and themes because I am a pretentious piece of shit. Overall, this video is all 3 of those things. I will explain to you the mechanics of the Void, how to survive in it, and finally, what exactly the Void is about. The best way to start, in my opinion, is to pick up where we left off with Sister Death. But before we do that, I should mention there is a lot of nudity in the Void, and since YouTube tends to go insane when it encounters pixelated nipples, I will probably have to censor a majority of the footage in certain areas of the game. If you want the uncensored version, then play the game. Sister Death explains where we currently are is just above the area where your soul goes to die. And if you want to survive in this new world, you will need to consume color. To consume color, we need to fill the heart Sister Death gave us with a color we have stored. But to store color, we need to find it first. Fortunately, Sister Death has drops of color around her island to sustain us long enough to finally explore the rest of the Void. As we leave the island, we see the rest of the Void is connected by strands. Although to do anything in the Void, we must use color, but we have to be careful because without color in our hearts, we will die. One of the first chambers you enter will kinda help you understand how foreign this world feels. This area appears to be inside what we could assume to be a silo of some sorts. However, inside the silo are stairs and platforms that lead to the upper levels. Here we could find lamps and drawings on the walls of images we can't quite seem to understand. Still, color is plentiful here, and to survive in the Void, we need to explore these chambers. The more chambers you enter, the more surroundings start to seem familiar yet alien at the same time. You will enter an area that you would recognize as a garden with trees standing tall above you and even benches and gates around the area. Then you will enter an area where a bridge looms in the distance, but the architecture looks like it's from a culture you have never encountered before. The most unique thing the Void does with its environments is they are all locations you feel like you should recognize and understand, but there are certain aspects to it, such as the architecture or the biome itself, that presents itself as something foreign to you. Normally in situations like these, you would feel like a tourist to a new land, and there is always excitement to that, but the void was never supposed to be a destination you could reach. Because of that, when you take your first steps into the land, it's hard to get accustomed to your surroundings so quickly. Despite your surroundings, you could take some comfort in knowing you're not alone in the void. And Sister Death is not the only sister around. The sisters are natives to the void, but the paths to them are blocked. To reach a new sister, you will have to feed a sister enough color to fill 2 hearts. Once that is done, you can proceed to a new area in the void. There are 11 sisters in the game, and not a single one is the same as the last. Sister Death is your first sister, but to survive in the void, you will have to meet all of them and fill their hearts. Not all sisters are as welcoming as Sister Death, but even if they refuse to see you, they are powerless in their own realm. Each sister is bound to her realm by chains of color. They know the ongoings of the realm and your actions within them, but they are only spectators to whatever happens because of these chains. They are imprisoned, but with your help they can be free of their chains. Although by doing this, you will draw the wrath of the greatest threat in the void. These are the brothers. They are the guardians of the void and the keepers of the sisters. The sisters are the closest thing you will get to humans in the void, but the brothers are much like a nightmare that had escaped your dreams. As the rulers of the void, the brothers have set commandments for everyone to follow, and if you do not follow each of these commandments to the very letter, the brothers will execute you. Fortunately, with the help of Sister Death, the brothers mistake you as one of their own and have taken you under their wing. You are now under their mentorship, but that also means you are now under their watchful eye. Any wrong move will cause you to be marked as a heretic, and they will gladly purge you from the world to protect what they care about most. Color is the greatest resource in the void. It is the lifeblood of everything, and that includes you as well. The brothers have set commandments because color has all but left the void, and it is now a scarce resource. There are 7 colors in the void: gold, emerald, violet, azure, amber, crimson, and silver. Each one is made up of unique properties the others do not possess, and every sister has 2 preferred colors you must feed them. For the rest of the game, color will be your driving force in everything you do. You can collect and grow color, but you have to use color to perform actions and keep it within your body to continue living. It is a very fine line to walk, and if you fall out of line even for just a brief moment, you will die. Later in the video, we will discuss a lot more about the brothers, sisters, and color. But for now, if you're interested in playing the game, I will warn you. It is a very harsh and unforgiving game, much in the vein of Pathologic. When you play the game for the first time, they will not tell you a lot of the mechanics that are affecting you until nearly halfway into the game. And without the knowledge of what these mechanics are, you can easily set yourself up in a fail state without even knowing it. Now, let's say you go through my guide and you're still struggling to get through the game. Fortunately, there is a mod that adjusts the difficulty to something you would consider either easy or medium. If you go with this mod, I highly suggest you go with the medium difficulty selection because struggling in the void is still part of the story thematically. And while I don't think it should be a torturous trench run like Pathologic, I still believe it should be challenging. Or hey, if you don't care about that, then the easy difficulty makes the game a breeze to go through so you can explore the world at a much more comfortable pace. I will leave a link to the difficulty mod in a pinned comment down below. Now for the guide, I want to preface this by saying the only reason why I survived the void is thanks to a guide by an author named Scroll Knight. This has to be one of the most in-depth guides I've ever seen for any video game, and Scroll Knight does an excellent job of breaking down every little detail and walkthrough you need to know. If you need some quick info but don't want to rewatch this video, I cannot recommend their guide enough, and just like the difficulty mods, that will also be pinned in a comment down below. If you want to learn these things yourself, which is the intended experience for the game, then skip ahead to where we start doing a very deep dive into the story of the game. So to start off, if there is a single thing you should take from this guide, it is to save every single time you do something. Without the difficulty mods, a single mistake in the early game can easily end your run later. Towards the end game, you will have a bit more wiggle room, but get into the habit of saving as soon as you can. Now we talked a lot about color, so let's keep that up. In the void, to use color, you need to store it inside a heart, and once inside, it will start converting into Nerva as time passes. Nerva is what you use to perform actions, but you cannot use it unless you have been converting color. When you're on the Void map, you can accelerate time to get to locations faster, but this will also convert color faster. It is important to never speed up time any longer than you need to. Every second you spend on the map will convert color, and the only way to survive is to have a healthy balance of Nerva to use for actions, and enough color to fill your hearts to survive each cycle. If you end up having a good amount of Nerva to use, the one thing you should absolutely know is using color can harm a realm. What this means is when you use color, you damage a realm, and that damage will determine how many predators will spawn. The most common way to use color at first is to defend yourself from these predators. Instead, I highly recommend you avoid them since many of them can be easily outran or simply avoided just by going a different path. Doing this ensures the realms will be healthy so you won't have any problems later on. Now to use color, you have to use glyphs, but one danger you should be aware of is you can waste color with certain glyphs. You will collect many glyphs throughout the game by collecting new hearts. Each glyph have a unique use, but some of them will easily drain color if you aren't careful. Each glyph is used by drawing a symbol in color with your mouse. This sounds like it is hard and it can be a bit difficult, but it's a lot easier to get used to than you think. Glyphs such as the donor are what you use to cultivate trees with color so you can harvest them later. But if you draw the glyph incorrectly, you will actually lose color in the process and the tree will only receive a small fraction of the color you intended, making your later harvest a small one. This can actually lead to a fail state. Alongside this, donor is also the glyph used to donate color to sisters, so it is easily the most important glyph in the game and one you will want to master quickly. However, not all glyphs are like this. Combat glyphs such as Hawk actually do not waste color if you mess up the symbol, and they even have a color cap so you don't waste more color than you intend. Although not all glyphs have a color cap, so tread lightly when drawing them. Next thing to know is when you fill your hearts with color, you actually gain bonuses from them, which can be tracked in the meter on the bottom left. If the percentage is at 100, you are receiving the full benefit, and adding more will not give you any returns. All 7 colors have their own unique bonuses, but for now, these 3 colors will make the difference between a failed and successful run. We mentioned earlier how you could damage a realm by using color, but later in the game you will be forced to use it. So, to prevent any further harm to the realm, you will need to fill your hearts with silver. Silver protects the realm from damage, and as we mentioned earlier, the more you take care of the realms, the easier your endgame will be. So always have some silver on hand in case of emergencies. The Void is a game dedicated to balance. You will have to fill the sisters' hearts with certain colors to progress the game, but you also need to save color for the bonuses and the use of glyphs. To make this balance a little easier, filling your hearts with gold will nearly double the amount of color you donate to a sister, making it easier to maintain that balance. Gardens are where you will cultivate and harvest your color, but to get access to the gardens, you will need to fill about 2 hearts of that sister. The more gardens you have access to, the easier it will be to survive. But filling a heart is no small task and takes careful planning. And because of that, you should never be donating color to a sister without filling your heart with gold. Since we're on the topic of harvesting color, you should know, just like the sisters, you can actually double the amount of color you donate to them. As we said earlier, you could use the donor glyph to cultivate trees, but these trees will have a color cap. If you fill your hearts with violet, this color cap is reduced by half, meaning you will spend half the amount of color to cultivate them and still get the full harvest the next cycle, giving you a positive gain of color every time. Filling the hearts of sisters isn't the only thing you need to do in the game, which adds to that tight rope you gotta balance. But if you keep these colors in mind, you will have a significantly easier time going through the game. Just know you won't get far if you don't plan ahead and waste color. Your gardens will have diminishing returns each cycle until it finally runs out and needs time to reset before you can cultivate it again. That being said, you should never, and I mean never, fill an entire garden in one go. This is the easiest way to lock yourself into a fail state, especially early on in the game. Cultivate half the trees in each garden, and when those start to really diminish, then you can cultivate the other half. That way you always have a source of major color while you're waiting for the trees to reset. Another way to waste color is actually by storing it inside your hearts. Now that sounds confusing, so let me explain. Each heart comes with a color cap. Now you place color by collecting it from the right and storing it inside a heart, but there is a catch to that. If you place 75 color inside a heart that holds 50, then 50 of that color will be stored, but the other 25 color will actually be thrown out of your inventory entirely. This is the easiest way to unknowingly waste color, and I'm not entirely sure if the game even tells you that this happens, so you could go through your entire playthrough tossing out color and not realize it, kind of like my dumbass. With all those tips, your first time in the void should go so much better than my first 3 attempts did. Although I said it once and I will say it again. If you have any trouble at all, instead of referring back to this video, I highly suggest you check out Scroll Knight's guide instead. It is seriously the best resource out there for this game, and it'll easily help you with any problem you have. Now, we get to the reason why I decided to make my longest video yet on the void, and that is the story. The following sections is mainly my personal experience with the game and the conclusions I have drawn from it. The devs have said the void is a game with various meanings and intentional vague information. There are certain themes and plots that the game presents, but the devs want you to interpret what the void means, and by doing that, you can actually come up with something entirely different than I have. As I mentioned earlier, Ragnar Rocks created a video essay on the void, and his interpretations are so insightful, yet veer into a different direction than mine will. I highly suggest checking out his video when you get the time. For now, there will be no spoilers because I'm giving my personal interpretation and theories on various subjects in the void. When we get to spoilers, you will be given a warning. But for now, let's dig into the game. Let's start with the brothers. As we mentioned earlier, the brothers are the self-proclaimed keepers of the void, but is that their true purpose? From what we know, the brothers come from a different realm called the Nightmare and had ascended to the void, meaning they are not natural to the void. The brothers do claim the void is their heaven because in their previous realm there was no color to be had. When you take these facts into consideration, it becomes apparent what the brothers represent. Our own human history is made up of this exact same scenario. Hell, I'm from America and this is starting to feel a little too familiar. The brothers are invaders to this realm, and once they see the resources that were not available to them in their realm, they claim ownership through their sheer might and begin to impose their own rules onto the void. Notice the brothers follow a list of commandments with a religious zeal on what you can and cannot do in the void. There is no explanation on how these commandments came to exist, so we can only assume that the brothers made these rules up on what they believe would be best for the realm. And to the brothers, what is best for the realm is for them to hold power over all of the color so they could satisfy their hunger. The brothers are selfish and spiteful. The sisters need color to survive, and for that, the brothers label them as a threat to the void. This can explain why the sisters are so harshly treated by the brothers. They give them the bare minimum to survive so they could steal the rest of the color for themselves. The brothers' true interest will always be color. In fact, there is some evidence that could point to them not caring about the void as a realm, but only the resources it can provide. When the game starts, the brothers are not present in the void, and Sister Death tells you she hopes that they have left for good, meaning the brothers can return to their original realm anytime they please. Although their original realm doesn't have colors, so how do they survive without it? The possible answer is because they don't need color like the sisters do. It is a luxury resource to them, and during your first conversation with the Mantid, he tells you once you ascend as a brother, they will hold a feast in your honor. But their own rules state not to waste color, and it angers them when you do, yet they are willing to collect a large amount of color to feed all the brothers and yourself in celebration. There is more evidence to the brothers' hypocrisy, but that will have to be covered in the spoilers section. One thing I love is this game does a wonderful job at making you feel like an outsider to a new world. Everything in this world is so foreign and strange at a glance, and in some areas things seem to make sense, but then in others they defy logic, or at least the logic we are used to. We enter the void knowing nothing, and because of that, we are practically fated to die. That is, until Sister Death intervenes. As we covered in the start of the video, we see that Sister Death guides you through your journey, but in reality, she's doing much more than that. If it wasn't for Sister Death, our soul would have immediately died in the void. We know nothing about color, hearts, or the chambers of the sisters. So imagine the start of the game, but without her guidance. You would have to figure out for yourself how to survive, and that's assuming you even figure out that you're in danger. At the start of the game, you have no heart, meaning you cannot hold or convert color, but Sister Death places it within your reach so you can survive. She plays the role of a maternal figure guiding what might as well be a child to a new world. Out of everything you are told, one thing is consistent. The void is dying, and there is no turning back. You can grow as much color as you want, but there is an ending to this world, and it is approaching. Although before that happens, you have just enough time to meet each sister and hear what they have to say. Meeting the sisters and learning who they are is a highlight of the game, and because of that, I won't go over each one of them right now. Instead, that will be for the spoilers section because the game is building up to a choice. But for right now, let's talk about just what that choice is. Each of the sisters you encounter reveal a piece of the puzzle to what your true purpose is. At first, the sisters ask you to defeat them, but the more you do, the more is revealed. Ava will most likely be the first sister to let information slip. She talks about how Color is preparing for her to rise to the surface, but what exactly is this surface and how does she get there? Ailey gives some insight to this when she mentions that only a living soul filled with color can ascend to the limit above. So to recap, we're currently in the Void, which is where the sisters live. And below the Void is the Nightmare, where the brothers originated, but also where your soul was supposed to disappear into. Then there's the upper limit, where the population of the Void can ascend similar to how the brothers ascended. But how exactly can one ascend to this upper limit? Ima is the one who gives you your true purpose. The rite of devotio is the act of ascending someone to the upper limit, and you are the only person who is capable of doing it. Now, the question still remains, are we special in that regard, or are we the only ones willing to do it? That will be covered in the spoilers section, but this rite comes at a price. To perform the rite of devotio, there must be 2 sacrifices. The first being all of the color in the Void, the second being yourself. The sisters do not seem distressed at the prospect of someone dying for another to ascend. All of them seem to believe that a sacrifice is the only way to create new life, which is something we see throughout the game as we donate our color to grow trees and feed the sisters. But remember, the Void only exists because of color, and the Void is ending because color is finite. That means you're not just sacrificing yourself, but also everyone else in the Void. This doesn't seem to scare the sisters, but the brothers are terrified of it. This reaction seems so strange because another consistent thing you are told is no one understands the meaning of being selfless in the Void, yet none of the sisters have a problem with their death in the Void if they are not chosen. So how can that previous statement be true? With that question in the air, we are now finally in the spoiler section of the video, so let me give you your warning. The Void is one of the most unique experiences I've had with a game, and that experience comes from exploring the Void and learning its secrets. Please do not ruin that for yourself if this video even made you slightly interested in the game. In fact, the whole purpose of this video is to try to make more people interested in the game so they could explore the game, and hopefully the game could rise in popularity like Pathologic, and then we could get some cool fan art and cosplays. But if you end up having a hard time with it and would rather just watch a video of someone explaining the Void, then that is also fine, because that's basically what happened with Pathologic, and history seems to repeat itself with Icepick Lodge. With that being said, the spoiler section is the real meat of the video. We will be exploring various themes and theories I've alluded to earlier, along with analyzing each of the sisters. All that will culminate with my personal pick for the rite of devotio. Although keep in mind, these are my own personal interpretations, and this is a game with various meanings. So maybe you won't be spoiled too much because you can play the game and have an entirely different outlook on it. Make your choice now, because we are going to explore the Void. Many people in the Void tell you many things, but that doesn't mean it's all true. You enter the Void with not a single clue of the world you just walked into, so as you go through your journey, you take everyone's words as fact. But the more you begin to understand the world, the more you understand you're not the only one who is lacking information. I won't go over every single piece of misinformation you're given, and that's mainly because slowly learning about the world and realizing who has been telling you false information is genuinely a fun way to immerse yourself in the world. Although a lot of this misinformation is not explicitly told to deceive you. We don't know the origins of the Void, or how the sisters' first day in it began, but if you think about it, every single being in the Void may have started out very much like yourself. They could have been just as confused and ignorant of the world around them and how it works, but as they spent more time in the Void, they could have come to their own conclusions on how the world works. But that doesn't mean their conclusions are correct. The most obvious example is many of the sisters and brothers claiming no one knows how to sacrifice or be selfless in the Void. They will keep mentioning that throughout the entire story, but their own actions prove them wrong. The first person that should come to mind about selflessness is Sister Death. We already covered how she took you in and cared for you, but when you start learning about the upper limit and the rite of devotio, you soon realize Sister Death is showing you genuine love. We already established her as a maternal figure, and just like most mothers, they will give and give to you and expect nothing in return, all just so they could see you grow up healthy and safe. But there is no safe space in the Void. Sister Death from the start of the game was in a prime position to set herself up for the rite of devotio and ascend to the upper limit. She could have easily manipulated you and steered you away from all the other sisters. And this in itself is important to note because Sister Death is not your true sister. As the game progresses, you are informed by multiple sisters that a sister named Ole is your true sister, and she has been waiting for you this entire time. Ole herself eventually manages to contact you, asking for you to come find her. It's not just Ole pushing you to go to her, but all of the other sisters as well. Well, except for Ava, who blatantly tells you that she's better for you than Ole. However, Sister Death doesn't exactly encourage you to go see her, but she does acknowledge the fact that you are her brother. The only reason why she doesn't encourage you to go see her is because that will put you in danger, which goes against everything Sister Death wants to do for you. Going back to the previous subject, it's such an interesting piece of world building that the game does. It tells you multiple times, there is no selflessness in the void, but then it starts you off with someone who shows you pure kindness. I think thematically, it's probably the writer's way of setting you up to question everything you think you know, or what you have heard about the void, which leads to every piece of dialogue being much more important to you. This also serves as a way to build a special connection between yourself and Sister Death. Speaking of connections, meeting the sisters and forming your own connections with them is the most engaging and important part of the game. Every single sister in this game is unique in almost every single aspect you can think of, and this is because their entire being is made up of two colors. Color has its own personality and themes in the void, and we already talked a bit about that in the gameplay guide. The reason why different colors give different benefits is because those benefits represents what those colors stand for. And when you connect those colors to the sisters, you begin to understand their personalities much more. Let's examine Sister Death's colors, which are gold and emerald. Gold in the game is described as the color of love, unity, respect, and pity. Already, each of these words perfectly describes Sister Death, since we experience all of this throughout the game. Then we have emerald, which is the color of patience, self-control, awareness, but also the color of greed. Combining the knowledge of what these two colors represent, Sister Death's actions begin to make a lot more sense. She is the embodiment of altruism because of her color combo, but there are hints of the negatives that come with it. The first being emerald representing greed. It may seem weird that the sister that is so caring and giving is also the sister that has hints of greed within her. But did you realize we already discussed what this greed looks like? Sister Death is content with keeping you to herself, but oddly enough, this isn't a bid to ascend her through the rite of devotio. This is what greed looks like for this color combination. She genuinely wants to help you and keep you safe, but at the cost of keeping you with her instead of going to Ole, who Sister Death admits is your true sister. She's willing to let Ole die just so you could stay safe from the brothers. Sadly, this isn't where the negatives end. Gold is also the color of self-sacrifice, and normally that is considered a noble and heroic thing, but that is usually from the perspective of someone who is not performing the sacrifice. Once you reach the endgame, Sister Death falls into despair. At this point, the brothers are incredibly aggressive towards you, and you have so many sisters to manage, you might just barely survive each cycle with enough color to see you through it. Sister Death's main motivation is to keep you safe, but when you're constantly in danger from multiple threats, it just causes her to give up. She tells you she doesn't have the strength to go on, and decides to sacrifice herself to leave behind all of her color to help you one last time. Again, there is no selflessness in the void, but Sister Death's concern for someone other than herself drove her to perform the ultimate sacrifice. And now you are alone, and the brothers are closing in. But are they really the brothers they say they are? Throughout the game, everyone in the void acknowledges you as a brother. This is why the sisters are so wary of you at first. But strangely enough, if you compare yourself to the brothers, you'll notice that there is a major lack of body horror going on. Although to the brothers, there is a major debate between them on your status as a brother. Now this next section is a theory, and I advise you take this with a major grain of salt, but I do have some evidence for it. You are a brother, but the brothers around you are frauds. The brothers are meant to be caretakers of the void, and with that title comes the responsibility of taking care of the sisters. To take care of a sister, you have to feed her color, which is what you do throughout the whole game. However, to do this, you need to use the donor glyph on a sister, but that shouldn't be a problem for the brothers because they should be able to use their own glyphs. The real problem is what Ailey reveals to us.
Color doesn't like the brothers. They keep lympher of color inside themselves, but they can't convert it. So the collected color circulates in their entrails and burns them from the inside, causing horrible pain.
So Ailey knows the brothers cannot convert color, but converting color is the first step in using color, because without the conversion, you have nothing to feed the sisters with. Ailey even mentions they keep the color inside of them where it burns them from within, although you as the player cannot keep color inside of you because it will continue to be converted. So if the brothers cannot convert color, how are they able to feed their sisters? The answer is, these brothers cannot do that because we learned that there were many more sisters in the void and they all starved to death. My belief is we are a true brother, a being similar to those who previously inhabited the void and took care of the sisters. Eventually, color would start to leave the void and the original brothers left to chase after it. Later on, the beings we currently know enter the void and claim they are the brothers. But this doesn't add up because these brothers cannot perform their original duties. We already covered the hypocrisies of the brothers earlier, so it's not so far-fetched to assume they are also frauds pretending to play a role in the void they are not capable of fulfilling. In fact, knowing they originated from the nightmare but somehow became the de facto leaders of a new limit plays into our earlier conversation of them taking the void by force after the original brothers left. We know color doesn't like being wasted, so the brothers devouring color without the ability to convert it explains why Ailey claims color doesn't like the brothers. Because color itself knows that they are parasites to the void. But since the brothers are so religious, how come color doesn't tell them to stop? Color is something we spend our entire game manipulating and cultivating, but it is easy to miss its secrets. As you play the game, you will hear a voice respond when you interact with color. At first, you could just assume it's disembodied voices of lost souls similar to yourself, but when you pay attention to what they say, you realize color is in fact communicating with you. They start off with what seems to be promises of what their power can do for you, but it isn't until later in the game where you will finally earn color's attention. Color is finally talking to you and has claimed they have chosen you to carry out their will, and their will involves the rite of devotio. They know the upper limit is there and they are waiting for someone to ascend, but they know just as well as you do that the brothers are your true obstacle. But back to our earlier point, if the brothers treat color like a religion, why can't color just order the brothers to stand down? It's because the brothers cannot hear color, which exposes their final and greatest hypocrisy. The ones who took up the mantle as the keepers of the void and the champions of color are the ones who are truly blind to color's nature. The brothers may preach all they want, but with this piece of info, we finally lock in the brothers' true nature as parasites to the void. They cannot convert color, they cannot sustain the void's true purpose, and they are not natives to the void, but they are frauds and liars masquerading as righteous warriors. This makes the oppression of the sisters even worse because they can in fact hear color and know firsthand of its hatred towards the brothers. But they are powerless to do anything. We know the void is dying, and we know all voids are destined to die, but because of the brothers' invasion, we can assume that the state of the void we currently live in is a failed state that it should not normally reach. As evidence for this, we can look back at how one of the sisters mentioned there used to be over 40 sisters, but they died of starvation. This was most likely caused by the brothers stealing color for themselves, and originally there was many sisters to choose for the rite of devotio, but now our selection is limited. Color wants you to wage war against the brothers, so the void could finally fulfill its purpose. But that's not the only war being fought. Color isn't a singular entity, it is more like a choir. Each color has its own voice and its own goals. But to understand these goals, you have to understand what happens when you complete the rite of devotio and color's relationship with the sisters. To pick a sister is to choose to ascend them to the upper limit, but what exactly does that mean? Ava once again provides some insight.
If it isn't the new brother, you're quite a specimen. Have you come to replace my whaler? To own me? Consume my flesh? Like hell you will. Get out. You no longer serve me. Go at each other's throats while you learn who's a spirit and who's alive. I'm on my way. Color is already filling me, preparing me to rise to the surface. When I arrive, I'll turn that world into a fairy tale and launch a golden age that will cause angels to envy people. Now go and tell your pals to free me, and be quick about it. Or you can do it yourself, if you're not too scared. Timid thing.
If Ava is to be believed, then ascending a sister means they will have free reign over the upper limit and will shape it in the world they want to live in. It seems to be a pretty straightforward conclusion: ascend a sister and create a new world. However, color is now in your ear and drops the biggest revelation of the game. For most of the game, your goal has been to pick a sister and ascend them to the upper limit through the rite of devotio, but there is a second option the sisters did not tell you about. You are a dead soul that happened to find its way into the void through the help of Sister Death, but there's so much more to you than that. To have died means that at one point, we have lived, and color knows this, but color also knows a way back. Out there beyond the void is the one who lost you and is currently dying, but with the rite of devotio, we can choose yourself to ascend and present the one who lost you with color to revive them. Now we keep saying that, the one who lost you, although what exactly does that mean? Color has the answer, and this is the biggest turning point in the game.
Have you decided to take the short path back? Don't rush things. All of the easy ways only lead down. Or haven't you understood anything? A human life is a chain of voids. The sleeper is the one who lost you. The void is you. You have a chance to part with the one who lost you, the one who ceased to live, and to present him with a new life. So return and finish your deed with dignity. Take what's best from him. Let him live. Then you can try to be born again, spirit, and you'll make it, if you don't disappoint me.
This entire time, we've been living in our own creation. The void is created through human life, and because that human life ended, the void is now dying, but it's not too late for the one who lost us. Although, if we are the void, then who is the nightmare and the upper limit? Well, the color silver has that answer.
I'm silver. What is this void, spirit? Who is the sleeper? Have you ever thought about it? Some say this is heaven, and they're right. Others say this is a man. They're right too. I'll reveal the truth, guest. The void is a limit. Life is made of limits. They are many, and they're linked together like a hanging chain. Because that's the only way a soul can move, up or down. And there's no way to stay in one place. Remember that, spirit. Now, collect hearts from the chambers of the sisters you've yet to pass. I'll tell you what to do when you've done this.
So, we are not just the void, but the nightmare and the upper limit as well. But we have to keep moving, so if we are all of these limits, what does that mean for us? If human life is a chain of voids, my personal interpretation of this is the limits are phases and periods of our lives that we live. Color using the phrase dying alive to describe the one who lost us, and even the title of the one who lost us, seems to imply our body actually hasn't died, but experienced death in another fashion. When we talk to the color amber, we can learn the possible meaning of the sleeper's death.
My name is Amber. Yes, how sorrowful a man's path can be. The void is often called the sleeper. Right now, it means the same thing, but this limit hasn't always been a sleeper. Before he ceased to live, it was awake, and I gladly came here. He was an artist and a poet, a creator. Back then, when the sleeper created dozens of sisters, I came here even more willingly. But now he has fallen into slumber, and worms are crawling around his chambers, and his soul is descending deeper nightmare. That's how souls are lost. People just fall asleep. Souls are heavy after all. To hold a living soul inside, you need to think and create sisters.
Color knows what the sleeper originally was, and the sleeper by nature was a creator. The sleeper, or the one who lost us, seemed to be very active before, and through that he created dozens of sisters and color was plentiful. But now the sleeper has fallen into a slumber. In that same conversation, Amber states that souls are lost by people falling asleep, mentioning that souls are heavy. Take a moment to think about where we are located. We are in the void, and above us is the upper limit, but below us is the nightmare. If limits are phases of our lives and we are not meant to stay, that means each limit represents the state our life is in. In reality, our lives would have many ups and downs. Some people may have more downs than ups and vice versa, but you are always moving in a different phase sooner or later. This is what I believe what Silver meant about the limits and why we can't stay, because life itself may not allow us to stay. Although the fact that we are in the void does not bode well for the one who lost us. We do not know how many limits are above us, but we do know that there is a bottom, and the nightmare is that bottom. The nightmare has been described multiple times as the world of absolute death, and if the limits are meant to represent phases in our lives, then we are in danger. My interpretation is by color leaving the void. That means somewhere out there, the sleeper is slowly giving up. And if the sleeper doesn't move up to a new phase in his life, aka the upper limit, then instead, he will move down to the world of absolute death. Meaning the sleeper is considering ending it all. Now, our location makes so much more sense. We are in the void, a word that is used to describe emptiness. Feel free to disagree with me on this next part because this is going into mental health, which is a fucking landmine field of a topic, but nothingness is usually a common way to describe what depression feels like. That empty feeling that comes with depression causes people to enter incredibly dark periods in their lives, and it is my belief that the sleeper is currently experiencing this. This would explain why Color originally left the brothers, not because it was mad with them, but because Color itself had lost the sleeper. Color is what is preventing us from experiencing absolute death in the game, and color itself has many meanings behind it, all of which invoke emotions whether it be negative or positive. But without color, there is nothing, and when there is nothing, it feels like there is no reason to go on. That is where the rite of devotio comes in. If we choose ourselves, we can return to the one who lost us and present them with color, filling them with emotions they once had long ago that created the sisters and filled the world with color. We have the opportunity to save the sleeper, but something doesn't seem to make sense here. If the sleeper is human, and the sleeper created the sisters, what exactly happens if we choose to ascend them? Going back to what Ava said earlier, a sister will ascend to the upper limit and create a new world, but doesn't that seem like a huge escalation? We had just established that we are a lost human soul, and the void is the creation of the one who lost us. But if we choose a sister, it sounds like we ascend them to godhood where they could create new life entirely. I'll be honest, from my first couple playthroughs of the game, that is exactly what I believe would happen. But after learning more about the nature of the void and the sleeper, who are one and the same, I think the sisters are being a bit metaphorical. We already established that the limits are possibly stages of our lives and we can only move up and down. If we choose ourselves, we present the sleeper with motivation to live again and they will continue once again on their path. But if we choose a sister, I believe things change dramatically. Earlier we talked about Sister Death and her personality. That personality was created by her personal colors of emerald and gold. Through those colors, Sister Death has her own motivations, beliefs, and goals. But when we meet the rest of the sisters, we realize each one of them have their own unique motivations, beliefs, and goals as well. This is where the goals of color come into play. They, along with the sisters, were created by the sleeper and care for him, but with the void dying, the sleeper has little time left. Since each of the sisters have their own colors, that means you are not only choosing a sister, but also choosing two colors to ascend to the upper limit. This is where Sister Yanni comes in because she reveals the more insidious nature of color. But unfortunately, Sister Yanni is a bit of a wasted character because she provides exposition into a storyline that was cut from the game. Originally, color was supposed to be a bit more evil in nature, and using too much of a certain color would damage the void and bring certain curses upon you. But because of development restraints, that would never be implemented into the game. which is kind of funny because it's a history repeating itself situation because their previous game Pathologic self-admittedly had the same problem. So as collateral damage, Yanni tells you all this information of a great war that will happen between the colors, only for that to never occur, making Yanni lose some development as she becomes an irrelevant exposition device. Although you could say in-universe, this does play to the idea of sisters coming to their own conclusions about the world and possibly being wrong. In the end, color does have a much more forceful side, but it never escalates as far as the devs originally intended. Still, choosing two colors through a sister is important because it means those two colors will be the dominant forces in the upper limit. Now, let's get to my interpretation of what happens when you choose a sister. They do not create a new world for them to rule over as a god. Instead, they create a new dominant personality for the sleeper moving forward. If life is a chain of limits, and each limit represents different phases in our life, that means each limit could also represent when we become different people during those phases. You're not the same person you used to be 10 years ago. It's even possible you're not the same person you used to be a month ago, because that's just how life works. We are constantly evolving through our experiences, and for better or worse, when we reach a new phase in our life, we also reach a new person as well. The sisters talk about creating new things when they ascend, but we could assume that means they will motivate the sleeper to create. Remember, the only canonical fact we know about the sleeper is that he was a creator. Knowing all of that, I believe this is our purpose in the void, to drag ourselves away from the emptiness and reach the upper limit, leading the one who lost us onto a new phase of their life. But to do that, you have to make an active choice. Do you ascend yourself and have the sleeper continue to be the person they used to be, or do we choose a new personality for the sleeper moving forward? Now, before we move on, I believe there's no wrong answer here. The Void is very much a game that invites you to create your own meaning of its world, and it takes that in a literal sense when you realize the game's main goal for you is to find the meaning for the one who lost you. For me personally, I believe choosing to ascend myself is not the correct choice to make. I believe life is about evolving and striving to take the lessons you experienced and learn from them. To choose to ascend yourself is choosing to stay in the same position that nearly led you into the nightmare. So now that leaves the question, what sister do I pick? This next section will be the last section before I enter my closing statements. But I will now analyze each sister and give my interpretation on what I believe they stand for. I will go through each sister, starting with the sisters I honestly wouldn't choose to ascend, and moving on with the sisters I was very much considering to ascend, and finally ending with my definitive choice on who I perform the rite of devotio on. The first sister to talk about is also the sister I would never consider ascending, and that is Aya. Aya is a unique case because unlike the other sisters, she doesn't have a chamber and can roam around the void freely, which in itself raises questions about the sister's color bindings. However, when you first meet her, she immediately accuses you of killing Sister Death, which, to be fair to her, is a fair assumption because we spent the most amount of time with her as she was shunned by the others. The problem with this is she doesn't seem to care. In fact, she gives you the vampire glyph which allows you to kill sisters with your own hands. This immediately raised the biggest red flag possible because not even the brothers encourage you to kill the sisters outright, unless they believe they are plotting to kill the sleeper. Aya's colors are amber and crimson, which is a very interesting combo. Amber and crimson are said to not be like each other, but still have things they share in common. Crimson itself is a very volatile color as it represents anger and destruction, though it can also represent creation. Amber, on the other hand, represents madness and delight along with creative joy. It is a very indulgent color, and when combined with crimson, I believe it's safe to assume that Aya is genuinely crazy because of her color combo. She actively gives you the tools to kill sisters and even encourages you to do it a few times. But despite all of this, there seems to be strange moments of clarity within her. Amber is the color of consciousness, and despite Aya's willingness to throw the lives away of the other sisters, she seems to acknowledge something no one else does in the entire game. She believes Sister Death is your true sister. It's a strange turn from her accusations earlier, but Aya calls Sister Death your one and only. She even encourages you to perform the rite on her. That is where the clarity ends because Sister Death is no longer with us, and despite not wanting to go near this sister, seeing her acknowledge Sister Death like that added so much to her character that led me to appreciate her just a bit more. Within a chamber of fire and steel lies Sister Una. When you first enter the chamber, you will notice it's unlike the others so far. It's a vast place and almost maze-like in structure, but the fire burns bright no matter where you go, and there are distant screams within them. Una kneels before a great furnace, staring into the flames as she completely ignores your existence. Una's colors are crimson and azure, but from what we have seen so far, we can easily mark crimson as the dominant color. It's an interesting interpretation of the color. Crimson is the color of destruction, but it also has the power to create. And when we look around the chamber, we realize she's in a forge used to create tools. Smithing would require you to destroy pieces of material, but so you could turn it into something new. However, her second color reflects a different side of her. Azure is the color of suffering and inner pain. When we enter Una's Soul Obscura, we see that she is completely engulfed in flames, with burning coals under her. However, despite this, she seems to be in ecstasy. Una seems to have a religious element to her as she is seen praying, which eventually leads into a climax of some sorts. Una is a zealot because of the effects of Azure, which is also the color that provides a strong shade of hope. Hope is something religion often gives to people, and with that hope, it is possible to do great things. But this is combined with Crimson, meaning it is exaggerating the darker sides of religion. Una is so low on the list because she reminds me of the brothers too much. Just like the brothers, she is filled with a religious zeal, and almost every interaction you have with her places blame on you for the state of the void, just like the brothers. She does seem to be somewhat supportive of you as she directs you to sisters who can help you, but overall I feel like she is a brother in sister form, which is why I wouldn't choose her for Ascension. Aya isn't the only sister to wander the void freely. Before Sister Death sacrifices herself, you are approached by Echo. Of all the sisters, Echo is the most encouraging of accepting the death of the void, but she is also the most encouraging towards the rite of Devotio. Echo's colors are silver, the color of miracles and magic, along with violet, the color of secrets and concern. As we move forward, I would like to point out that Echo is the one who made me realize sisters with the color violet also know some of the secrets to the void. Echo in particular knows the secrets of the rite of Devotio and is the one who tells you exactly how to perform it. She and Aya also point towards a much more important secret, but I will save that for later. Echo is a dancer of sorts and performs many mesmerizing movements alongside her fan in her Soul Obscura. Funny enough, Echo is described as crazy by both her colors and her sister Aya, although it's a bit hard to believe, especially after we just talked about Sister Una and her fanaticism, or, Aya wanting to kill people. Although I believe this is because Echo holds knowledge of what must happen to the void, and to the other sisters, seeing someone talk about tearing the sleeper apart doesn't exactly come across as very stable. Still, this knowledge Echo holds turns out to be entirely accurate. After playing the game multiple times, I realize nearly everything Echo tells you is true. This makes her into a mentor of sorts, very similar to how Sister Death was. Although why is she so low on the list? Just as I mentioned with Yanni, Echo's character suffers from being an exposition device, and there isn't much room for developing her actual personality. Through her colors, we can tell she is passionate and expresses this passion by revealing secrets to you, but other than that, it's hard to tell what direction she will lead in the upper limit. Still, to her credit, she's one of the most friendly sisters in the game, and her low position is only because of the uncertainty of what she would create instead of me fearing what she would create like I do with Aya and Una. At the top of the void lies a chamber, and within that chamber, a broken house. Each room lies in disarray, and you could feel the uneasiness of the house as you creep through it. Finally reaching the bedroom, you see a makeshift tent pitched with bed covers, and under that, you will find Sister Yanni. Throughout the video, I mentioned how the void is such a foreign world where its environment seemed like a far cry from what we're used to, but we have entered an area that seems familiar to us. While the house is run down, it is still a house, and that is something we have yet to see in the void. This is because it is said that the top of the void is much closer to the upper limit, and I believe this is where the two realms begin to merge at the border, where those foreign elements of the void begin to slip into something much more familiar. As for Sister Yanni, I already said my piece about her character, however her colors still provide some insight to her. Yanni's colors are violet and azure, both of which cut a clear personality out for her. Sisters with the color violet tend to know the secrets of the void, and as we discussed earlier, Yanni is the same since she tells you about color's more insidious motives. However, combined with Azure, Yanni has grown timid and afraid due to possessing the color of suffering. But since she also has the color of hope, she's willing to relay all of this information to you in hopes that you will be able to thwart the color war. Sadly, this never got implemented into the game, but knowing Yanni is willing to be brave and strive to help the situation places her higher on the list than the others. I just wish we had more of a chance to see her develop as a character. There is a garden where a beautiful river flows. Around it are trees, shrubs, and bushes accented by red ribbons that lay all around the garden. Here, you will find lounges, and within one of those lounges lies Sister Irie. Within her domain, it seems like you could hear faint moans in the distance, and given the seemingly indulgent nature of her chamber, you would figure Irie is a seductress of some kind. Only you would be far from right. Irie, out of all of the sisters, is the most hostile to you, as she will constantly talk down to you for what you have done in the void, and honestly, she has the right to do that. As we mentioned in the gameplay guide, using color will damage the realm, and that is exactly what Irie accuses you of. Now, if you watch this video before playing, you will go into the game knowing that and taking steps to avoid damaging the realm. But the game doesn't tell you this information until you reach Irie, and even then, that could be nearly halfway through your playthrough. Canonically, you are supposed to make mistakes because you don't understand how the world works, and some sisters do point this out, but they tend to be a bit more lenient on the topic, but Irie does not. She will criticize any mistake you make with handling color, and believe me, she will have many examples to choose from. However, her colors tell an interesting story of her personality. Irie has the color of gold. The color we established that explains Sister Death's selflessness is within the sister that criticizes you the most. If gold is the color of dedication and love, why does Irie treat you so harshly? Because her dedication and love isn't directed to you. Instead, it is directed to the void. Irie's main concern is the health of the void, and since you are canonically harming it, she is more aggressive to you in return. Her first conversation with you is telling you how you are ruining the void, and all conversations after that is the same thing. It's a bit interesting to see this side of a sister with gold inside of her. Makes you wonder if Sister Death would treat someone else the same if they brought harm to you. Still, as time goes on, Irie seems to warm up to you, even if it is just a small bit. And that accusatory tone goes away and is instead replaced with someone who wants you to learn from your mistakes. On the other hand, her second color is amber, and that seems to explain Irie's outward personality. I believe Irie presenting herself in a more sexually free manner than the other sisters, and the indulgent nature of her chamber is a direct representation of the amber within her. Irie is a unique character because she is a sister you directly anger before even meeting her, and because of that, certain aspects of her personality may be absent because she sees you as a threat to what she cares about. Still, despite that, Irie is a bit lower on the list because of the vibe of indulgence I get from her doesn't feel like it would be a healthy fit for the upper limit moving forward, even if her defending what she cares about is a noble trait to have. In the void, there stands a tower. You arrive at the top of the tower, and as you make your way down, predators begin to swarm you. By now, you are used to using color for protection, so they do not pose much of a threat, and step by step, you reach the bottom of the tower. This is where Sister Ima stands, connected to a device that will eventually kill her. Ima's tower is one of the more unique chambers in the void since each chamber that belongs to a sister is safe from danger, but Ima's is filled with predators. We can assume that prior to our arrival, Ima has been sentenced to death by the brothers, and that is why she is strapped to this device. Although what her crime is remains a mystery. Ima's colors are emerald and azure, which provide some interesting implications on her crime. Azure is the color of suffering, which is at the forefront of Ima's character since she is slowly waiting for her death to come. But emerald is also the color of self-control. What could have possibly made Ima commit a crime that would possibly lead to her death, despite having the color that is dedicated to rest and balance? It is possible Ima didn't do anything, and the brothers simply just wanted her to suffer. But in the void, we have no way of knowing what she has done. Still, despite her situation, Ima is one of the most friendly sisters in the game. She is close to death, but despite her situation, she encourages you to ascend a sister, even if she is not the one you choose. That is ironically why she is in the middle ground of this list. Her colors present an interesting idea of her personality. She is very much willing to give, which we can attribute to Emerald since that is a trait she shares with Sister Death. But Azure makes it where she is possibly willing to give too much, which causes the inner suffering that comes with the color. All the sisters that have the color Azure have very interesting differences between themselves. Yanni has grown timid and scared because of her knowledge, and even claims she doesn't want to go to the upper limit. Una is a fanatic that borders on that dangerous line the brothers have crossed, and then Ima shows signs that she is willing to help others, even if it harms herself. In Ima's case, on paper it sounds like a notable trait, but remember, we are presenting life to someone who is coming close to falling into a nightmare. If we ascend Ima, there is a possible chance the upper limit will consist of a life that is constantly giving and no self-care in between. She is definitely not a bad choice, but overall I believe we have to consider the future of the sleeper as a whole, and choose a sister who could take care of herself and possibly others. You enter an alcove, and within this are the markings of luxury. Statues, fine cloth, and candles mark the room. The owner of this alcove wants it to be known you're in the presence of an empress, and that empress is Sister Ava. Ava wastes no time when it comes to discussing what she wants. She wants you to feed her color because she knows she has been chosen to ascend to the upper limit. She knows exactly what she's going to do once she ascends, and that something is a new golden age to make all others envious. However, you are not part of this glory, you are simply a servant, and as a servant, you must follow Ava's orders, one of which being to forget the other sisters and stay with her. Ava is easily the most demanding of the sisters, but there is some nuance to that. Her colors consist of violet and amber, which paints a clear picture of who she is. However, violet is the color we established that knows the void's secrets, so what exactly does she know? Well, Ava is one of the few sisters that talks to you outside of her chamber, and she is the one who reveals what each color can do. Ava demands your service and attention because she knows she is the chosen one, at least in her mind, but she also takes the time to help guide you on your journey, similar to Echo in Sister Death. This adds a new layer to her character, and that layer gave me major conflict on what her placement should be. On one hand, while she is ever demanding and treats you as someone beneath her, she does display initiative and exact knowledge of her goals and how she is going to achieve them, which is something almost none of the sisters show. To me, this is a very positive thing to have when it comes to the future of the upper limit. We want to move forward with a passion to achieve our goals and with the confidence to back it up. So what was the deal breaker for Ava? Again, this list is purely my own personal reasoning, and there are no right and wrong answers. But while Ava displays some traits I am gravitating towards for the final ascension, it is ultimately the color amber that sways me away. For the positives that Ava presents, there are also the negatives. I believe Amber has given Ava a very clear case of narcissism, and that is what ultimately landed her further down the list. Ava does want to create a utopia when she ascends, but that utopia is purely for her own personal ego. Sure, she is willing to include others, but ultimately it is to push her own greatness instead of helping those around her. Her being on the list right next to Ima is a bit ironic. They have a trait I want, and they have a trait I do not want. Ima is very selfless to a very dangerous fault, while Ava is very selfish to a very dangerous fault. I have to say, Ava has been moved up and down the list many times, and all of them had her stay within the top 5 sisters each time, so she is definitely not someone I am totally opposed to ascending. In fact, I almost picked her for the final choice. It's just when I started looking at the negatives, they became too apparent to ignore. Still, Ava remains a very interesting character with layers to her personality that were very fun to explore and debate about. You come upon an entrance to a grotto. Around you there are shipwrecks and debris, but despite the signs of destruction, there is a calm presence in the air. You enter the grotto, and within it, lying in her hammock, is Sister Uda. Above her, there are drops of color raining down, and at first you would think her attention is on the rainfall, but when you look past that, there is where her desire lies. An eyeball moon looks down upon Uda through a crack in the grotto, and this is how she spends her cycles in the void. Staring upon the moonlight glow, Uda makes a strong impression through her chamber alone. There is a level of melancholy as you enter, a state that doesn't seem to be present with any other sister, though when you finally talk to her, at first you might feel like Uda comes off as cold and dismissive, though unlike Irie, this doesn't feel like it comes from a place of anger, but from a place of sadness instead. Originally, I believed that Uda had given up and embraced her death alongside the end of the void, but after studying her character, I believe there is another side to her. Uda's colors are emerald and silver, but if there is one thing to note about emerald, it is the color of self-control. Uda by her nature may seem emotionless, but it is possible she just prefers to keep her emotions in check due to the color combination, though there are hints of sadness that slip through the cracks in her dialogue. Most of her dialogue takes a more pessimistic approach to the state of the void. She believes the void has lost its meaning, and she believes you are ultimately powerless to do anything. Though there is a side to her that hints she wishes it wasn't this way. If you notice the rainfall in her chamber, you will see that there are drops of emerald falling on her, which makes sense seeing how that is her color. What doesn't make sense is why there are drops of azure mixed in as well. Silver is Uda's second color, so why are they not dropping in the rain instead? That is because Uda displays some levels of hope, which is what azure is said to represent. Even though she seems all but resigned to her fate, anytime she sees that there is a way to help, she will take that opportunity. On your first major task, the odds are stacked against you due to a lack of information, and Uda takes it upon herself to give you what you need so you can complete your goal. She says that will be the last time she helps you, but later on the Mantid questions Uda on your meetings with her. And even with the possibility of execution looming over her, Uda swears to the Mantid, "You're not breaking any commandments." Again, showing the willingness to stand up for what she believes in despite what her outward personality might suggest. Although this does raise an interesting development for the sisters. While all sisters have their personalities made up of two dominant colors, Uda shows they could still show traits of the other colors as well. Uda seems to be unique in this regard because while analyzing the other sisters, they all seem to display their two colors and nothing else. It's interesting to see that a sister may have the ability to adopt another color, but if Uda did this willingly or not is another question. Uda ended up being an inspiring sister to me. She has this creeping sense of sadness looming over her, but it never stops her from helping those in need, a trait she shares in common with Sister Death due to their colors. Something that strikes me about Uda is she seems older than most of the other sisters. Sister Death, Yanni, and Oli have silver hair, but they each seem younger than most of the sisters. But Uda has a sense of maturity about her. I believe this is a deliberate choice because as we get older, we begin to understand certain things about the world, and to some, that could turn them towards pessimism. Uda, being one of the older sisters, has probably seen much of the Void's tragic history, which is why this overall presence of melancholy can be felt in her chamber, because she understands why the world is this way, but she wishes it wasn't. Still, Uda's maturity and willingness to fight for what she believes in made her a very appealing choice to me, because I believe the sleeper can benefit from that wisdom that comes with maturity, and a steadfastness to see their ideals through. Sadly, Uda falls just short of my final choice. Underneath it all, she is kind and caring with the wisdom to see and understand some of the least desirable parts of the Void. She has the traits I've been looking for, but what is stopping me is that creeping sadness that comes with her. I've been conflicted about her for a while. On one hand, she has shown she has the strength to fight through this sadness, and the way she fights is by showing compassion for those around her. Although I feel like this sadness can also be very dangerous. The reason I chose not to ascend myself is because I didn't want to set the sleeper on a path that would possibly lead us back into this situation. But then comes Uda, who has all the traits I'm looking for, but with that small possibility we could find ourselves once again looking into the nightmare. The traits Uda have are so promising to me that I almost want to go completely back on that statement and give her an exception, but ultimately I have to stick with what I believe is best for the sleeper. And while Uda is not my final choice, she definitely is among the best picks to ascend in my opinion. There is a chamber at the very top of the Void. This chamber holds something that is important to you, so much so that nearly every sister in the game directs you towards her. As you enter the chamber, you find yourself in an apartment. Unlike Yanni's chamber, this building is well kept yet a bit desolated. At first, all you have is your own footsteps and the creaking floorboards to accompany you, but sparing a drop of color to a piano fills the air with somber music. You go further down into the hall, and soon you enter another room. This room contains Sister Oli, and this is her cradle. This is the sister all others claim is your responsibility, because unlike Sister Death, this is your true sister. However, meeting Oli for the first time is a surreal experience. You enter the Void not knowing a thing about it, and by the time you get to Oli, you have learned so much about the Void, colors, the sisters, and the brothers. Then you finally get to meet your sister, and the roles have reversed. Oli is the youngest sister, and she knows next to nothing about the Void. When you first talk to her, she has so many questions. She doesn't understand a single thing about anything around her. She is everything you were when you first entered the Void, and it's such a fantastic way to show how far you have come. The game throws such overwhelming odds at you, and to get this far, you have to overcome all of them. And what you get to show for it is this placement into a role that Sister Death filled at the start of the game. You are no longer the lost wanderer. You are now the mentor, and you have a lost soul in front of you that needs help. Throughout the game, each chamber we find a sister in is tailor-made to represent who that sister is. And this is no different, but I love the choice of furniture and items in this chamber. When you first enter the chamber, you could find a wedding dress hung by the mannequin's neck. The dress represents the fact that Oli was supposed to be promised to you, but since you never came, it lies there alone. Then we have the main landmark of the chamber itself, the cradle. Oli is the newest sister to the Void, being born after Sister Death, so the cradle is there to reflect her youth, although she is treated differently than how Sister Death is treated. Sister Death is the nameless sister because she was never given a name or a brother. Then around her birth, the void started dying, which would grant her the title Sister Death, as she was seen as a bad omen. Then comes the birth of Oli, and soon she has a name, a brother, and enough support from the sisters for them to point you towards her. It's strange how much of a warm welcome Oli got compared to Sister Death, and honestly, even after playing through the game multiple times, I can't come up with a reason for this. If you have any ideas on why, I would love to hear them. A lot of Oli's dialogue speaks of her looking out the window. She and the wedding dress are placed next to large windows to reflect this, but what she is looking at raises so many questions. Outside the window is what appears to be a normal human city. Here I'm using the word normal ironically because everything you have experienced in the void makes something you should be familiar with feel anything but that. Oli's colors are violet and gold. Violet has always been assigned to the sisters that know the secrets of the void, but Oli doesn't know anything about it. This is a color that is the keeper of secrets, but it also is the color of suspicion and being inquisitive. I believe sisters with this color have a curiosity that drives them to eventually learn the secrets of the void, and that is something we see from Oli right from the start. But since she is so young to the void, she hasn't had a chance to learn those secrets. So what exactly was she supposed to learn? Well, look out the window and there is your answer. That city we're looking at is actually the upper limit. We have confirmation from color to support that, and now we see where the sister of our choice will ascend to. And I feel like it fuels my theory that we are reinventing the sleeper instead of creating a new world entirely. I also believe that Oli was the sister destined to learn the secrets of the upper limit, but because she was born so late, that will never happen. Still, I wonder why it is Oli in particular that seems to be given such a unique opportunity. The other sisters can only dream about what the upper limit is, but Oli has it within her sights at all times. Notice how the game pretty much encourages you to choose Oli as your sister through many various means, whether it be mechanically by creating a goal to make contact with her specifically, or narratively by having all the sisters point you straight towards her. Some of them even ask you to stop feeding them color and go to her instead. It seems a bit strange how Oli is so pushed to the player's attention. As a choice, you may wonder what would make Oli so appealing to be chosen for the rite of Devotio. She is the youngest of the sisters, and because of that, she doesn't understand the world like the other sisters do. Sisters like Ava and Uda have clear goals and principles, but Oli is still in the process of learning what's around her, so how can you expect her to know who she is and what she stands for? The other thing I could see, which I honestly think is awesome thematically, is the game did such a great job at reversing the roles. You now fully take up Sister Death's mantle. And you want to ascend Oli because you want to protect her and keep her safe, since you are supposed to be her mentor. With that in mind, Oli was nearly the sister I performed the rite on. Ultimately, I did not feel comfortable with sending her to the upper limit mainly because of her youth. To send a sister to the upper limit when she doesn't seem to know anything about the world or even herself felt like a possible disaster waiting to happen. Even if you believe she could be mentored into something great for the sleeper, you still do not have enough time for it, so in the end, you will send a sister that may be unprepared for what she will face. Oli is a fantastic character who provides such a unique moment of reflection near the end of the game that really puts your journey into perspective. While I may have not chosen her for the rite, I still believe she makes one of the largest impacts in the game and made the final choice so much harder to make. So hard, I still feel a small hint of guilt that she is not my true final choice. Now, for the final choice. We have gone through so many sisters and even lost one. Each sister presents a possibility for the upper limit, and each of them have their pros and cons. Choosing a sister is no easy task, especially when all of them are so well written and provide many insights on what it means to live. Still, there can be only one choice. The night sky is above you, and in front of you, a blimp. Looking around, you seem to be in a construction zone of some sorts, and there is a clear industrial influence to this area. There's not much to say about this chamber, because that is how it reflects its owner. You walk slowly to the blimp, and its owner, Sister Ailey, is waiting for you there. The chamber says so little, yet it says everything you need to know. Sister Ailey knows how to cut straight to the point instead of wasting time dancing around riddles, but this isn't out of impatience. By nature, Ailey is simply straightforward in her conversations with you. In fact, she's even self-aware enough to possibly make the only joke in the entire game. When you first talk to her, she speaks in that cryptic manner that most sisters talk in, only to reveal that she was just messing with you. After that, everything she says to you has little to no room for interpretation. What she says is what she means, And with that, her intentions are actually well-meaning. Like other sisters, she tells you crucial information about performing the rite of devotio, but unlike the others, she actually takes a moment to give you slight comfort about what you are doing. Remember, not only are you sacrificing the void, but yourself as well. But Ailey wants you to take comfort in knowing that this is just how creation works. While other sisters do criticize you for your mistakes, Ailey instead wants you to take those mistakes and learn to be better, unlike the brothers. Ailey's colors are crimson and silver, and I love what these colors represent through her character. It's not very subtle that Ailey is supposed to represent a military figure, and when you see her for the first time, the impression you may get is strict and demanding. Although the more you talk to her, the more you realize it is quite the opposite of that. Despite having the color of anger and destruction within her, she is one of the more calm sisters in the game. That is because she takes on the more positive traits Crimson has to offer. Creation and self-confidence are said to be associated with Crimson, and pair that up with Silver, which is the color used to protect the Void from harm, then you possibly get the only true leader personality among the sisters. You can argue Ava shared this trait, but Ava leads for herself while Ailey leads to help others. Crimson allows her to cut straight to the point and move forward with any choices she makes, while Silver balances out the anger within her and allows her to create that calming presence a leader gives to their people. This presence comes from the fact that she knows what she is doing and she's doing it to help those around her. Ailey is the sister that has all the traits I'm looking for without any of the red flags I have seen from the other sisters. She's a leader who can motivate herself and those around her. She's a fighter who will push back against any oppressive force, and she can be a mentor to those who need guidance. Of all the sisters, besides one who's no longer with us, I couldn't really find a reason not to ascend her. The Sleeper has been knocked down and nearly fell into the nightmare. And to me, what the Sleeper needs now is someone who will fight back and shape the upper limit how they see fit, but not in a way that leads to personal gain. I have gone through 10 still living sisters, and among those 10 were some very strong candidates and some not so strong candidates. In the end, it seems like the colors Crimson and Silver will be the forces picked to shape the upper limit. I can't help but wonder how this will change the Sleeper. The Sleeper is a creator by nature, but with this ascension, they will now be a leader. Will the Sleeper become an important figure in a community of creators? Will they become a leader among hungry artists, or will they become a mentor to those who want to create? Sadly, we won't get to see what happens, but the time has come for Ascension. So now, it is finally time to end this journey, and fill each heart in our body with color and ascend Sister Ailey to the upper limit. Although, even though Ailey feels like the right choice, she doesn't feel like the choice I personally wanted. If it wasn't for one other sister, then Ailey would be undisputed in my personal choice. But honestly, from the very start, I already had my choice, but sadly that was taken away. She is in the limit of absolute death, so what has been done cannot be reversed. But there are two sisters who were hinting that was not the case. I know we established that Sister Aya is insane, but she was the only one to acknowledge Sister Death is your true sister. I mean, sure, immediately after that, she suggested giving a dead sister your true heart for the breakthrough. But there was something else she said. She encouraged you to cry tears over her grave. And due to Aya's almost sinister nature, at first I had assumed that was meant as an insult to mock what you had lost. Then I started thinking about it, and that insult wouldn't make sense because she is actively encouraging you to ascend Sister Death. She even goes far enough to say she isn't the one for you, something the other sisters only do when they encourage you to go to Oli. Still, as hopeful as it seems, I don't think it's wise to take advice from the insane sister. But what if your only ally starts giving you suggestions? Sister Echo is the sister I consider the most reliable when it comes to her information, even when she could talk in riddles at times. When Sister Echo reveals how you can find the Heart of Breakthrough, she mentions that only one sister is your sister. She encourages you to find her and to not make any mistakes. And by doing that, she says you might return the one who left on her own will. There's only one entity in the void that fits that title, and that is our Sister Death. You gather all the color in the void, fill your hearts until they are full of each color, and then you must draw the breakthrough glyph. The glyph only appears when you fill all 4 hearts of your chosen sister, which I have done for Ailey. But even after all of this, I think back to what Aya said, to cry tears over her grave. The void is ending soon, and we have everything prepared, so it shouldn't hurt to visit Sister Death one last time. We arrive at Sister Death's island, and we approach the tree that previously housed her. Though she is not there anymore, something new happens. The sign that signals you could draw color on an object appears on none other than her tree. The camera zooms out and focuses on the tree, and at the bottom of the screen, the breakthrough glyph appears. Now we have a new choice. Ailey is easily my pick for the breakthrough. She is strong and has a strong sense of dedication, but so did Sister Death. It's funny because now that I think about it, Ailey and Sister Death are very similar. My main reason for picking Ailey is not because she's the only leader among the sisters, but she is one of the few that would take care of others. She comforts you and encourages you to be a better person, but so did Sister Death. They are basically two sides of the same coin. Ailey, because of her colors, takes a more offensive approach when it comes to how she handles situations, and that also reflects how she would take care of others. Sister Death, on the other hand, takes a more defensive approach, and we know firsthand how she takes care of people. If you watch the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, it feels very similar to the scene where Wayman talks to movie star Evelyn and explains how he chooses to fight. Both sisters have some differences, but in the end, the idea of what I want for the upper limit is present. With that said, we draw the breakthrough glyph on the tree, and this is what happens. We saved our Sister Death from the nightmare, which again proves not everything in the void is true. It's such an exciting moment. Not only is our mentor and guardian back, but she has done the impossible for a second time. What will she have to say to us? What did she see in the nightmare? And where do we go from here? I am so fucking sad to say what you're about to get is a massive disappointment. When you talk to Sister Death after this, she just reverts back to her dialogue from the start of the game. Everything I just said previously goes unaddressed. Any new dialogue will come from filling her third and fourth heart, and even then, it doesn't really satisfy what a major moment this was. I should probably also temper your expectations for the other sisters, because besides Oli and Sister Death, they all say the same piece of dialogue when you finally fill all of their hearts. For a game that has been such a masterclass in narrative and world building, this feels like such a letdown. And I wonder if the whole we ran out of time and budget motive Ice Pick seems to have ended up affecting this part of the game as well. Everything in your journey leads to this, and each of the sisters deserve to have a unique moment when you choose them. Still, everything is all said and done, so it's time to ascend Sister Death. Only problem is, when you did the breakthrough on the tree, you spent all the color in your body, and now you have to collect enough color to do it all over again. Sister Death is meant to be basically the secret hard mode ending, and they will make you work for it. Again, if you need help with this part in particular, go straight to Scroll Knight's Guide. Finally, it's time to perform the rite of Devotio. You draw the breakthrough glyph on Sister Death, and watch her rise to the upper limit as the void begins to die. You get to see the upper limit sprinkled in the color of your chosen sister, and a unique poem will be played as you watch this. Now, you don't exactly get to see what happens to the upper limit beyond this, but honestly, I love that choice. The whole game is up for interpretation, and this should be no different. Although, I like to believe the poems give hints to what the upper limit will shape into moving forward. I won't spoil Sister Death's poem, mainly because I covered so fucking much of this game as it is, and some things should be left up for your personal experience. But this is the end of the spoiler section of The Void, and the end of my personal journey with the game, so let's close things out. Actually, you know what? Before we close things out, what if I told you a secret about the game? What if I told you everything about the game's story we just went over was only a fraction of what's really there? What if I said there's actually a different story entirely that hasn't been covered? We have covered The Void, but that is just the English version of the game. The Polish version of the game, titled Tension, is much different in gameplay and, most importantly, writing. We open the video with one of the first things Sister Death tells you, but in the Polish version, she tells you something significantly different. Just to give you an idea on how different these two versions are, let's go over the opening dialogue. In the English version, Sister Death will tell you, "This is a desert on the threshold of death. I think it's somewhere underground, but not deep, and around it, emptiness." But in the Polish version, instead you will get, "It's a purgatory's void in Earth's belly, just under the skin. Around emptiness and eternal hunger, repugnant voraciousness greater than anything else. Hatred deprives the soul of its entire order. Emptiness, fright, non-entity." According to reviewer Konjad, who took the time to list the differences between the Void and Tension, noted that Tension is much better written than the Void and has much more text. There's also storylines that are totally left out from the Void, such as the story of Sister Ino and Ani, who attempted to perform a breakthrough, only to be stopped and casted down into the nightmare for it. where they were turned into brothers. Yeah, you heard me right. Sisters can be turned into brothers, and they can even attempt the breakthrough themselves. Besides Konjat's review, there are little to no sources on Tension covering its story and its differences between that and The Void. But there is an English translation out there for it, and maybe one day I will return to delve further into the game's secrets. Although for now, it's time to put The Void to rest. So in conclusion, The Void to me is a very unique experience that is hard to put into words. Video games first and foremost should be fun, but in typical Ice Pick Lodge fashion, they stray away from that idea and attempt to change what a video game should be. I personally wouldn't call The Void a fun game. I probably wouldn't even recommend it to a lot of people. In fact, after playing through the game 3 times, I've only told 2 of my friends to play it because they are artsy-fartsy pieces of shit like me. Still, what The Void does provide is an experience unlike any other. They take a guess on what your actions will be when you first play through the game, and through that guess, they end up shaping the story. The gameplay is then structured in a way that no matter how much knowledge you have coming into the game, you are forced to make those mistakes that eventually shape the narrative in the game. It's such an interesting way to tie gameplay and narrative together in a way that feels organic instead of that illusion of choice other games present to you. The gameplay mechanics are unique in a way that they work perfectly for The Void, but if any other game attempted to use them, they might fall flat on their face and get some bad reviews out of it. Then you have the world itself, and I think this is a masterclass in world building. There's no handholding when it comes to learning about the world once you go off on your own. It's not often a game tells you a number of things about its world, and half of those things turned out to be totally false. It's such an interesting style of storytelling that I would love to be explored more by other studios because Ice Pick Lodge seems to have this shit down to a science at this point. A lot of people may play The Void, end up not liking it, and dropping it, which honestly is pretty fair. Still, I think this game is worth the discussion that Pathologic is currently getting. Is this going to be some hidden gem that suddenly becomes everyone's favorite little darling? Probably not. This is going to be the type of game H-Bomber Guy makes a 3-hour video about, or the game that finally sends Action Button into some Lovecraftian insanity trance. This game isn't for everybody, but if you are someone this game is for, then you might end up just as obsessed with it as I did. I don't think we'll ever see something like this again unless Ice Pick decides to give the game the Pathologic 2 treatment. So that's all the more reason why you should take these weird little games no one has heard about and just appreciate them for what they are. The Void is dark, stressful, and unrelenting, but it is also hopeful, rewarding, and uplifting. It is a roller coaster of a game on multiple levels that challenges what our idea of life and existence is, but still finds a way to present the good in hopeless situations. And hopefully, you can feel the same way when you explore the wonderfully absurd world of The Void. My name is Chris from Genuine Chill, and this video took so damn long to make. There's not much on The Void, so I wanted to make sure anyone who became interested in the game had a resource to help get them started, whether that came from helping them with gameplay or getting them interested in the world itself. Along with that, I hope the spoiler section with the discussion on the sisters promotes a lot more discussion on the game's story because I would love to see more interpretations on the game. If you liked the video, please like the video, and subscribe for more reviews. I'm gonna go pour one out for those who didn't make my final choice, but until then, I hope to see you next time.